The first punch landed like a thunderclap, splitting my lip and sending me sprawling across the marble floor of the penthouse. Blood pooled in my mouth, metallic and warm, as I stared up at the man who'd sworn to break me. But this time, something snapped inside. I wasn't his punching bag anymore. My name is Ethan Cole, and for 3 years, I've been the bodyguard of Julian Wentworth, the sole heir to a real estate empire that owns half of Manhattan. I'm built like a linebacker, 6'3", with scars that tell stories I'd rather forget. Julian, though, is everything I'm not. Slender, polished, with eyes like a storm over the Atlantic and a smile that could stop traffic. He's 25, same as me, but he carries the weight of a legacy that's as much a cage as it is a crown. And me? I'm the guy who takes the hits meant for him, both from the world and from his father, Victor Wentworth, a man whose wealth is only matched by his cruelty. It started small, Victor's insults, his sneers at my lowly background. I grew up in a Brooklyn foster home, clawing my way out of poverty with nothing but grit and a knack for fighting. Victor hired me because I was expendable, a shield to protect his golden boy from threats he'd never face himself. But the real threat wasn't some shadowy assassin. It was Victor. He'd lash out when drunk, his fists finding me when Julian dared to defy him. I took it because the job paid, because I had nowhere else to go, and because somewhere along the line, I started caring too much about Julian to walk away. That night in the penthouse, 3 years into my sentence, Victor was in a rage. Julian had refused to marry the heiress Victor had chosen, some strategic alliance to expand the empire. Instead, Julian had been seen at a downtown bar, laughing with a man me. The tabloids got wind of it, and Victor's empire doesn't tolerate scandals. He called me to the penthouse, his voice dripping with venom. "You're nothing but a thug," he spat, his fist crashing into my jaw. "You think you can ruin my son?" I hit the floor, tasting blood, but my eyes found Julian's across the room. He stood frozen, his face pale, hands trembling. He mouthed my name, Ethan, and something in me roared to life. I'd taken enough. For him, for me, for the secret we'd been hiding for months. It wasn't supposed to happen, not like this. I was hired to protect Julian, not to fall for him. But late nights, guarding his apartment, turned into conversations that stretched until dawn. He'd talk about his dreams, writing poetry, escaping the empire, living free. I'd tell him about Brooklyn, about the kids I'd fought to protect in foster care, about the mother I barely remembered. One night, under the glow of a single lamp, he reached for my hand. His touch was soft, tentative, but it burned through me like fire. We didn't say it out loud. Not then, but we both knew this was more than duty. Victor's next punch missed, and I caught his wrist, twisting hard. He yelped, staggering back, his face twisting in shock. "You dare?" he snarled, but I was already on my feet, towering over him. Julian rushed forward, grabbing my arm. "Ethan, don't," he whispered, his voice breaking. But I wasn't fighting for just me anymore. I was fighting for us. "Stay back," I told Julian, my voice steady despite the blood dripping down my chin. Victor lunged again, but I sidestepped, years of training kicking in. I didn't hit him. I wanted to, but I held back. Instead, I grabbed his collar and shoved him against the wall. "You don't touch me again," I said, low and deadly. "And you don't touch him." Victor's eyes widened, but he laughed a cold, hollow sound. "You think you can protect him from me? You're nothing. He's nothing without my name." Julian stepped forward, his voice trembling but firm. "I don't want your name, Father. I want my life." He looked at me, and in that moment I saw it, the courage I'd always known he had, buried under years of fear. He was done hiding, and so was I. We left the penthouse that night, Julian's hand in mine, the city sprawling beneath us like a promise. But Victor's reach was long, and I knew this wasn't the end. He'd come for us, for his heir, for his control. And I'd be ready. The streets of Manhattan hummed with life as we slipped into the night. Julian's hand was warm in mine, his pulse racing under my thumb. We didn't have a plan, just a shared heartbeat and a vow to fight for it. I've been beaten for years, but I wasn't broken. Not anymore. Not with him. We found a diner on the edge of the city, the kind with flickering neon signs and coffee that tasted like regret. Julian slid into a booth, his tailored jacket out of place against the cracked vinyl. I sat across from him, my knuckles bruised, my heart pounding. "What now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Now," I said, leaning closer, "we figure out how to be free." He smiled, a small, fragile thing, but it was enough. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. But freedom wasn't just walking away. Victor's empire cast a shadow, and I knew he'd hunt us down. He'd call it love, call it legacy, but it was control, pure and simple. I'd seen it in the way he manipulated Julian, in the way he'd try to break me. But I wasn't just a bodyguard anymore. I was Julian's, and he was mine, and that was worth fighting for. The diner's jukebox kicked on, playing some old Springsteen song about running and never looking back. Julian reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine. "I'm scared," he admitted, his eyes searching mine. "Me too," I said, squeezing his hand. "But we're in this together." That night, as the city slept, we made a pact. No more hiding. No more taking hits. We'd fight, for us, for the life we wanted, for the love we'd found in the cracks of a world that tried to crush us. But Victor wasn't the only threat. The city was full of eyes, and the tabloids were hungry. Our love was a spark, and Manhattan was a tinderbox. The next morning, we woke in a cheap motel room, the kind where the walls are thin and the air smells of stale cigarettes. Julian was curled against me, his breath soft against my chest, and for a moment, I let myself believe we could stay like this forever. But the world doesn't stop for love, and Victor's shadow was already creeping closer. We ditched our phones the night before, knowing Victor could track them. I'd seen enough of his paranoia to know he had people everywhere, private investigators, loyalists, even cops on his payroll. Julian's face was too recognizable, his name too heavy. We needed to disappear, but disappearing costs money, and all we had was what was in my wallet and the few hundred Julian had stashed in his coat. "We need a plan," I said, sitting up on the sagging mattress. Julian rubbed his eyes, his hair a mess of golden curls. He looked younger without the weight of his father's expectations, but fear lingered in his eyes. "I know a place," he said quietly. "Upstate. A cabin my mother left me. Father doesn't know about it. She kept it off the books." I raised an eyebrow. "Your mother?" He nodded, his expression tightening. "She died when I was 10. Cancer. She was the only one who ever stood up to him." His voice cracked, and I pulled him close, letting him bury his face in my shoulder. I didn't push for more. Grief is a private thing, and I knew better than most how it carves you out. The cabin was our best shot, but getting there meant crossing state lines without being seen. We took a bus out of the city, hoods up, blending into the crowd of early commuters. Julian kept his head down, his hand gripping mine under the folds of our jackets. Every glance from a stranger felt like a threat, every siren a warning. By the time we reached the small town of Hudson, my nerves were raw. The cabin was tucked into the woods, a modest wooden structure with a sagging porch and windows that rattled in the wind. It was nothing like the penthouses Julian was used to, but his face lit up when he saw it. "She used to bring me here," he said, running his fingers along the doorframe. "Just us. No empire, no expectations." Inside, the air was musty, but it was ours. We lit a fire, and for a few hours, it felt like we'd outrun the world. Julian sat cross-legged on the floor, a notebook in his lap, scribbling poetry like he used to before Victor crushed that dream. I watched him, marveling at how someone so fragile could be so strong. "Read me something," I said, leaning back against the couch. He hesitated, then cleared his throat. In the quiet, "We are whole, two hearts carved from the same stone, against the storm we hold." His voice was soft, but it hit me like a freight train. I reached for him, pulling him into my lap, and kissed him until the world faded away. But the world doesn't stay gone. That night, I heard a car engine in the distance. I was up in an instant, peering through the blinds. Headlights cut through the dark, and my stomach dropped. "Julian," I whispered, shaking him awake. "Someone's here." He bolted upright, his face pale. "It can't be him. Not yet." I grabbed the hunting knife I'd found in the cabin's drawer, my heart pounding. "Stay inside," I told him, but he shook his head, grabbing my arm. "No, we faced this together." The car stopped, and a man stepped out. Not Victor, but one of his men, a guy I recognized from the security team. He was big, bigger than me, with a scar across his cheek and a gun in his hand. "Ethan," he called, his voice calm but cold. "Mr. Wentworth wants his son back." I step onto the porch, the knife hidden behind my back. "He's not going anywhere," I said, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my chest. Julian stood behind me, his hand on my shoulder, grounding me. The man smirked. "You think you can take me?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. When he lunged, I was ready, dodging his swing and driving the knife into his arm. He screamed, dropping the gun, and I kicked it into the bushes. "Go back to Victor," I growled. "Tell him Julian's done with him." He stumbled back to his car, clutching his arm, and sped off into the night. Julian was shaking when I turned to him, but he didn't cry. Instead, he threw his arms around me, holding tight. "You could have died," he whispered. "I didn't," I said, kissing his forehead. "And I won't let him take you." We didn't sleep that night. We sat by the fire, planning our next move. The cabin wasn't safe anymore, but running blind wasn't an option either. We needed allies, resources, a way to fight back. Julian suggested reaching out to his mother's old lawyer, a woman named Clara who'd never liked Victor. She might help, he said. She knew about the cabin. She kept it secret. It was a risk, but we were out of options. The next morning, we hiked to a payphone in town, keeping our heads down. Clara's number was one of the few Julian had memorized. When she answered, her voice was sharp but kind. "Julian? My God, where are you?" "Somewhere safe," he said, glancing at me. "For now. We need your help." Clara didn't hesitate. "Meet me in Albany. Tomorrow. I'll bring what I can." We hung up, hope flickering but fragile. Victor's men were out there, and they wouldn't stop. But neither would we. Julian took my hand, his eyes fierce. "I love you," he said, the words raw and real. "I love you too," I replied, and in that moment, I knew I'd fight to my last breath to keep him safe. Albany was a gray blur of concrete and rain when we arrived, our clothes damp and our nerves frayed. Clara met us in a small coffee shop, her silver hair pulled back, her eyes sharp despite her age. She slid a folder across the table, her voice low. "This is everything I have on Victor's dealings. It's enough to bury him." The folder was heavy, stuffed with documents, financial records, emails, evidence of bribes and blackmail. Clara had been building a case against Victor for years, ever since Julian's mother died. "She made me promise to protect you," Clara told Julian, her voice softening. "I should have done more." Julian's hand found mine under the table, squeezing tight. "You're doing it now," he said. The plan was simple but dangerous. Leak the documents to the press. Victor's empire thrived on his reputation. Expose his corruption, and it would crumble. But Victor wasn't stupid. He'd know we were behind it, and he'd come for us with everything he had. Clara offered us a safe house, a place to lay low until the story broke. "It's not much," she said, "but it's off the grid." The safe house was a small apartment above a bookstore, cramped but warm. Julian and I spent the night poring over the documents, piecing together a story of greed and cruelty. Victor had bribed city officials, strong-armed competitors, even used his own son as leverage in deals. Every page made Julian's face harden, his resolve growing. "He's taken everything from me," he said. "My mother, my freedom, my life. No more." I pulled him close, my lips brushing his temple. "We'll end this," I promised. Together. The next day, Clara sent the documents to a journalist she trusted, a woman named Lena who'd made a career of taking down powerful men. Lena called us that afternoon, her voice crackling with excitement. "This is huge," she said. Give me 2 days, and Victor's name will be poison. But 2 days was a lifetime when you're hunted. That night, as we lay in a narrow bed, a noise woke me, a creak on the stairs. I was up in an instant, grabbing the knife I kept under the pillow. Julian stirred, his eyes wide. "Ethan, stay here," I whispered, moving to the door. The creak came again, closer. I opened the door a crack, peering into the dark. A shadow moved, and I lunged, tackling the figure to the ground. It was another of Victor's men, this one armed with a silenced pistol. We grappled, my training against his bulk, until I slammed his head against the floor, knocking him out. Julian was at my side, his face pale but determined. "We can't stay here," he said. He was right. We grabbed our things and slipped out the back, the city swallowing us whole. Clara met us at a new location, a motel on the outskirts of town. She looked shaken but resolute. "Lena's ready to publish," she said. "Tomorrow morning, it's over." But Victor was one step ahead. The next morning, as we waited for the story to break, my burner phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered, my gut twisting. Victor's voice was cold, controlled. "You think you can ruin me?" he said. "Turn on the news." I grabbed the remote, flipping to a local channel. A reporter stood outside a burning building, the bookstore. "Arson," the reporter said. "No casualties, but the apartment above was destroyed." Julian's face went white. "He knows," he whispered. Clara cursed under her breath. "He's sending a message. He'll find you unless we move faster." We didn't wait for the story to break. Clara drove us to a friend's house in the Catskills, a place even Victor couldn't know. The drive was silent, Julian's hand in mine, his eyes distant. I wanted to tell him it would be okay, but I couldn't lie. Not to him. That night, as we sat on the porch, the stars bright above us, Julian turned to me. "If this goes wrong," he said, his voice steady, "I need you to know you're the best thing that's ever happened to me." I kissed him, hard and desperate, pouring everything I couldn't say into it. "We're not losing this," I said. "Not now. Not ever." The next morning, Lena's story hit. Headlines screamed about Victor's corruption, his empire unraveling in real time. Social media exploded, and the city turned on him. But Victor wasn't done. As we watched the news, Clara's phone rang. Her face paled as she listened, then hung up. "He's coming for you," she said. "He knows where you are." The Catskills house was a fortress of sorts, old stone walls and heavy locks, but it didn't feel safe. Not with Victor's resources, his rage, his need to control. Julian paced the living room, his hands shaking as he checked the windows for the 100th time. I wanted to hold him, to tell him we'd make it, but my own heart was pounding too hard. Clara had a plan: get us out of the country. She called in favors, secured fake passports, and booked us on a flight to Canada that night. "You'll be safe there," she said, handing us the documents. Victor's reach doesn't extend that far. But leaving meant abandoning everything. Julian's dreams, my past, the life we'd barely started to build. I saw the conflict in his eyes, the same one tearing at me. "We'll come back," I said, gripping his shoulders. "When it's safe. When he's gone." He nodded, but his eyes were wet. "I just wanted to be free," he whispered. "You will be," I said, and I meant it. I'd make it true, no matter what it took. We packed light, just a backpack each, and waited for Clara's friend to pick us up. The news was still buzzing with Victor's downfall. Arrest warrants, frozen assets, a public turning against him. But men like Victor don't go quietly. As the sun dipped below the mountains, a black SUV pulled into the driveway. I grabbed the knife, my body tensing, but it was Clara's friend, a grizzled man named Tom who looked like he'd seen his share of fights. "Let's move," Tom said, his voice gruff. "We don't have much time." The drive to the airport was tense, the road winding through dark forests. Julian sat close to me in the back seat, his hand in mine. I kept my eyes on the rearview mirror, watching for headlights. They came too soon, a pair of beams cutting through the dusk. "Tom," I said, my voice low, "we've got company." He cursed, flooring the gas. The SUV lurched forward, but the car behind us was faster. It rammed us hard, and Julian gasped, clutching my arm. Tom swerved, keeping us on the road, but the car kept coming. I saw the glint of a gun in the side mirror. "Get down," I shouted, pushing Julian to the floor. A shot rang out, shattering the back window. Tom grunted, blood blooming on his shoulder, but he kept driving. I leaned out the window, knife in hand, ready to fight, but another shot grazed my arm, burning like fire. "Ethan!" Julian screamed, pulling me back. His face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. "I'm okay," I lied, ignoring the pain. "Tom, can you lose them?" "I'm trying," he growled, swerving onto a dirt road. The car followed, relentless. We were running out of time, out of options. I looked at Julian, his face lit by the dashboard lights, and made a choice. "Stop the car," I said. Tom glanced at me, incredulous. "You're insane." "Do it," I snapped. He slowed, pulling over into the dirt. The car behind us stopped too, and 3 men got out, armed and moving fast. I kissed Julian, quick and fierce. "Stay here," I said. "No matter what." I stepped out, knife in one hand, my other arm bleeding but functional. The men spread out, circling me. "Give us the air," one said, his voice cold. "And you walk away." "No deal," I said, and charged. The fight was brutal, a blur of fists and blood. I took down the first man with a slash to his leg, the second with a punch to the throat. The third got a shot off, clipping my shoulder, but I tackled him, driving the knife into his side. He went down, and I stood, panting, blood dripping onto the dirt. Julian was out of the car, running to me despite my orders. "You're hurt," he said, his hands on my face, my chest, checking for wounds. "I'm fine," I said, pulling him close. Tom was slumped in the driver's seat, alive, but fading. We needed to move. I helped Tom into the back, taking the wheel myself. Julian sat beside me, his hand on my knee, grounding me as I drove. We made it to the airport, barely. Clara was waiting, her face grim as she helped Tom into a waiting car. "Go," she said, handing us the tickets. "Don't look back." The plane was small, a private charter Clara had arranged. As we buckled in, Julian leaned against me, his head on my shoulder. "We're almost there," he whispered. I nodded, but my eyes were on the horizon. Victor was down, but not out. Men like him never are. Canada was cold, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes you feel alive. We landed in a small town outside Vancouver, a place where no one knew the Wentworth name. The safe house was a cabin by a lake, surrounded by pines and silence. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. Julian stood by the water, his breath fogging in the crisp air. I watched him from the porch, my arm bandaged, my body aching but whole. He turned, catching my eye, and smiled. A real smile, not the fragile ones I'd grown used to. "It's beautiful here," he said, walking back to me. "You're beautiful," I said, pulling him into my arms. He laughed, the sound bright and free, and kissed me, slow and deep. For a moment, the world was just us, the lake, the trees, the future stretching out like a promise. But promises are fragile. Clara called that afternoon, her voice tight. "Victor's been arrested," she said. The evidence was airtight. He's facing years in prison. Julian's shoulders sagged with relief, but I wasn't so sure. "He's got connections," I said. "He'll fight this." "He can try," Clara said. "But the world's turned on him. You're safe. For now. For now." Those words hung over us, but we chose to live in the moment. Julian started writing again, filling notebooks with poetry that spoke of love and freedom. I took up carpentry, fixing the cabin's sagging porch, building a life with my hands. We were cautious, using our fake names, keeping to ourselves, but we were together, and that was enough. One night, as we lay by the fire, Julian traced the scars on my chest, his fingers gentle. "You saved me," he said. "Not just from him, but from myself." "You saved me too," I said, and I meant it. I've been a shell when I met him, a man who took hits because it was all I knew. Julian gave me a reason to fight, not just to survive, but to live. Months passed, and the news of Victor's trial faded. We heard whispers. He'd lost his fortune, his allies, his power. But I never stopped watching the shadows, never stopped listening for footsteps in the dark. Love had made me strong, but it had also made me vulnerable. I died before I let anyone hurt Julian again. One evening, as the sun set over the lake, Julian pulled me outside. He'd carved something into the wooden railing of the porch, his handwriting neat and deliberate. Ethan and Julian, forever free. I laughed, pulling him close, my heart full. "You're such a poet," I teased. "And you're my hero," he said, his eyes shining. We stood there, wrapped in each other, the world quiet around us. Victor was gone, his empire dust, but the scars he'd left, on me, on Julian, would always be there. They were part of us, proof of what we'd survived, what we'd fought for. Our love wasn't just a spark anymore. It was a fire, fierce and unyielding, burning bright against the dark. The fight wasn't over. It never really is. But as I held Julian, the lake reflecting the stars, I knew we'd face whatever came next. Together. Always.